Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and we're going to talk a little bit today about how this next game between what really should have been extremely irrelevant opponents that should have no impact on anything, right? 2, 3, and 12 teams could ultimately be something that decides as much as the next decade or more for the AFC South. This is going to be a huge game and not necessarily one that you want to win, right? It's going to be crazy. I think it's going to have huge implications on both the Jaguars and the Titans. And so we're going to take a look at, how can the rest of this season shake out and how does this change things for both teams? So we'll talk about that. But first of all, want to let you all know, hope you had a great Christmas. I'm recording this right after on the 26th. So, had a great day. Enjoyed watching the Texans get their asses kicked. That was fun. The AFC South has honestly got to be one of the worst divisions to ever exist in football at this point, and I'm just glad we can finally recognize now that there are no special teams in this division. But yeah, so that was probably the highlight of my day personally, was watching that. But getting to what we're talking about here, right? This is the current draft order, where things sit. It's very likely right now that the Giants are going to have the first overall pick. That's pretty much out of sight, out of mind for Jacksonville. I think the only way it happens where another team could get it is if the Colts fumbled the bag this week against the Giants, which it's possible, but the Giants are really bad. It's a really bad football team. So that's kind of set in stone. Where things get really interesting is with New England, where you have a team that should have two very hard games left against the Chargers and against the Bills, but the Bills are in a position where if they were to clinch this week, which only requires them to win, they would clinch the second seed officially. There's nothing to play for in Week 18, and technically for them, if they want to do anything, they might just rest starters, not only because let's get them healthy, but if New England wins that game, now New England gets screwed out of either being in position for a quarterback trade back with, maybe the Raiders who want to come up, or the Browns, or a team like that. Or they could have got Travis Hunter. So it's a pretty big deal, I feel like, for how that game goes down. I think it's very possible that the Patriots win it, and I would actually bet right now, just looking at how things are going, that the Patriots probably end up with another win just because of that. So that leaves the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Tennessee Titans. After their game this week, Jacksonville will play Indianapolis on the road, which it doesn't really get talked about a whole lot, but Jacksonville has not done that well there. Obviously, they won last year in Indianapolis, but even with what was a really good team at that time, they nearly blew it against the Colts. So you just look at the history there. Jacksonville's not that great there. They don't have a good team right now, and it just doesn't make sense to me that they would beat the Colts on the road. And for the Tennessee Titans, it is possible they could win because they do play the Texans the final week of the season. And obviously, it's not just a matter of Houston struggling and the Titans having beat them the last time, but Houston, I mean, they might be locked into, I think, 4th seed at this point. I might actually have to look into that. They might be able to pull out depending on how things go, but it's very unlikely. Ultimately, I do think the Titans would lose that game, but there is a little bit of optimism that they would pull out a win there. So, with all this said, I think one of these two teams is going to lose out. I think it's very unlikely that they both win one more game. So that leaves you in a situation where if one of these teams loses this week, they're going to basically have their choice of either the best non-QB, or if you're Tennessee, you're going to be able to get a quarterback. So looking at how things could shake out. So this is just my predictions for how the last 2 weeks go. Ignore the Jacksonville game here because we're just going to show both outcomes. First, starting with if Jacksonville were to sweep, so the worst of the two scenarios if you're trying to get a high draft pick. But this is kind of how I see games playing out. You might disagree with some of it. That's okay. But this is just my guess right now. where this would leave the draft order. Jacksonville would fall from what is 3 to 6. And ultimately, if they had lost that game, they would be sitting at number 2. So they'd be in a very good situation if they wanted to take Travis Hunter, or if maybe a team like the Raiders was to say, like, hey, we need to trade up, we need our guy, and we're going to give you an extra first and then some, or something along those lines. So it's a pretty big deal for Jacksonville if they win this game, in what's a really bad way, honestly. And then you have the flip side of it, where if Jacksonville wins, Tennessee is now in a prime position to where, regardless of what happens with the Patriots, I think they're the team getting a quarterback. Because if the Patriots win that final game against Buffalo, Tennessee sits at number 2. And they're going to have a quarterback on the board. And if you're sitting here and maybe you're thinking, like, you're okay with the other options for Jacksonville, and you don't believe in any of these quarterbacks, you might be able to convince yourself that this is actually a good scenario. I'm not really in that camp, though. Because you're talking about the Titans getting Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, and I think that both those quarterbacks will be solid. I think it will at least lock down the position. And I'd be probably more afraid if it was Cam Ward, which that would be my guess, even though he's my QB1. So that could be a pretty bad situation for Jacksonville. Even if the Patriots lost out, if you're the Patriots, you're sitting here at 2. The Titans are at number 3. And we'll just show what that would look like. You would be fine moving back with Tennessee because you still could get Travis Hunter, which is a player they would absolutely need on their team. And you could get a bit of a haul moving from 2 to 3. So if Tennessee were to lose this game, they're in perfect position to get their next quarterback, as long as they believe in one of them. And here's the other side of it. Even if you thought they weren't going to draft a quarterback, and you get the more likely scenario where the Patriots starters beat the Bills backups in a game Buffalo has no reason to win, okay. So what, the Titans are going to take Travis Hunter here? I'm just saying, like, there's a very bad scenario regardless of where you go with this for Jacksonville. So that's what's on the line if the Tennessee Titans were to lose and the Jaguars beat them. If this series was split, and let's say Jacksonville were to lose this game, of which I'm just going to be straight, that's what I'm hoping. Because at the end of the day, the only reason why you root for a tank is because you think the team will be better because of it. And we're at a point where you're not building on anything they've really done with this current group. I mean, it's not like we're in the first year of a regime and we're trying to establish a winning culture. Someone else is going to have to reset things. So losing games doesn't really bother me right now. If Tennessee won this game and you have the same outcomes for everything else, you lose week 18, and then let's say the Patriots win. You are sitting at number 2 in the draft order, in position to where you could move down if you feel like you have a really good offer for a quarterback, or you could just sit there and say, screw it, we're going to take Travis Hunter. We need a cornerback. We need a receiver. This is the best player in the class for most people. You love that scenario, right? And so that would be a really good situation for Jacksonville. Even if New England were to lose out, you're getting one of the two options. Because if New England sits here at 2 and says, you know what, we can't trade back, even if teams are offering because they want a quarterback, we are just going to take Travis Hunter. He's too valuable of a player. Well, then you're going to sit here at 3, and you're going to get offers from the Browns and the Raiders. And, I mean, the Titans will probably call you, just tell them to shut up and hang up the phone. But you have offers that you can take, right? And you can get the haul instead. So you're going to get one of the two. You just don't have the choice. And that's what was so big about Jacksonville losing to the Las Vegas Raiders. Because now, if they lose out, they at least get one of those two very good outcomes. Even though I have a preference, of course, to getting Travis Hunter, because I think we need those types of players here. We need guys who can change games, who can make those big plays that turn the outcome of a game. Even with my preference to that, I would be very happy to just at least land one of these two scenarios. Now look at the Tennessee Titans situation here. You go to them, their strength of schedule, I'm curious as to why. I think it's just kind of bad luck with their scheduling. They have played much harder teams. So our strength of schedule for our opponents, 140 to 149. For them, they have 151 to 138. So they have 11 more wins from their opponents. And that's bad for Tennessee because you want a weaker strength of schedule to pick earlier. So you're sitting here as the Titans at number 7 in the draft order. You are firmly out of position for a quarterback. You would have to, if you're going to pull it off, you'd have to send a huge offer to the Patriots if they were to lose out. If that didn't happen, well, you're going to have to do it to the Browns. And then the Browns aren't going to take your offer because they're going to need a quarterback. The Jaguars won't. They're a division rival. So now Tennessee is in a situation where they're going to watch Jacksonville take Travis Hunter or get a haul of picks, trade off the pick that you could have got your quarterback at, and now you don't really have that solution. And look, at the end of the day, this is all hypothetical. I think this is how things could play out for sure. But we never know what's going to work out because it's always possible that maybe they would have dodged the bullet if they lost this game and they get a different quarterback and they were to go out and get maybe a Sam Darnold. And a Sam Darnold works out great for them, or insert a different name, or maybe they suck next year and they get a great quarterback in 2026. There's a lot of things that can happen. But generally speaking, you are pushing off the Tennessee Titans from getting a long-term quarterback of the future if the Jaguars lose this game. So there's a lot on the line in this matchup, and I think this is going to be one of those games that really defines things for a long time. Just as, take for example, Texans and Colts at the end of the 2022 season. I don't know where the Colts would have been picking. I'd have to go back and look at it, but that knocked the Houston Texans out of the number 1 pick. They would have had Bryce Young, right? And you could argue last year that would be worse for them because CJ Stroud played incredible. Now it's suddenly starting to flip, and there's a lot of ambiguity about it, but there's huge ramifications because of those types of games. And so I think this is the next version of that. And if Jacksonville ends up losing this game, well, it not only puts you in a better position in the draft and hurts your rival at the end of the day, but on top of it, if you want change, if you want those things to be official, it's hard to defend this team when you're losing games like that. The Raiders' loss was already brutal enough. Losing to Tennessee and Mason Rudolph, that's like a whole nother level, along with what the Raiders was. So, we'll wrap things up there, but I wanted to make sure I got something out and talk about this game a little bit before, and we'll kind of break things down once the game goes on Sunday. We'll talk about where things stand. And I think by that point, we're going to have a very good idea of where the Jaguars are going to pick, because I don't think they win in Week 18. I think it's pretty clearly going to be a loss to the Colts that week. We'll see, of course. It's always possible something crazy happens. But that's all I've got today. I appreciate y'all joining. Want to shout out our channel members, Premier Nasir 904, Mr. Dolphin, Scrubber Ducky 500, and Brian Foster. Hope y'all have a great rest of your day. And finally, go Jags.